God, that looks gorgeous on you.
Yeah, I wore that for you, actually. Yeah, when you have Michael Cabote's last piece he made, it seemed like it appropriate, especially since your whole new book is going to be like 1946 to present?
2025.
To 2025.
And after that, I'm taking a huge break and I'm writing fiction. I think I told you that over there.
And what are you going to write on, do you know?
I'm going to write short stories about the Southwest.
Oh, that's cool.
I've already written one. It's called The Angel at the Rio Puerco Dairy Queen.
I like that title.
And you know where it is. You
Yeah.
remember it used to be a horrible old dive with the bathroom doors hanging off the hinge? Well, I set this as back then, but it's pretty good.
Well, I got Paula Baxter here. We started our podcast. First thing she says, "Oh my God, this is on video," and I said, "You look great. You're dressed beautifully."
Yeah.
Who's the necklace?
I don't know who made them.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Fantastic people.
Yeah.
This is Orville Ticini. This is Dan Jackson, and this is Philander Begay.
Oh yeah, there you go. When Paula wears your jewelry, that's a pretty good sign. You know, it's such an interesting ride that you've had. I've read a little bit about what you've done, and I didn't really know a lot about you before. I think I didn't really know a lot about you until I got this last book that came out, the one on Pueblo, Navajo and Pueblo design. Is that is the title of it? Yeah.
Yeah, and I could talk about why it's the way it is if you want.
Yeah, why is that? Since we're talking about it.
I practice design history. I'm a design historian.
Right.
I've curated 6 exhibitions and written several magazine articles related to design history. Mm-hmm. It's a fairly new methodology. Started in Britain around the same time that material culture studies started with the Smithsonian in the 90s. They have a lot of similarities. And design history is particularly nice because you focus on tradition, the actual craft construction element, and then personal vision. And you don't have to get into value judgments, which do crop up in both anthropology and art history.
What do you mean when you say value judgments?
Value judgments that just creep in about the art, about the tribe, about the culture.
Value,
like
and
one
your
of the
judgment.
Yes, in my judgment, I'm trying to be pretty. I wrote reference book material for years as I was working through my career. Their value judgments do come in from time to time.
I wouldn't think it's a bias that would be hard not to, I would think.
Well, there are things like, okay, here's the biggest one of all. All Pueblo Indians are great lapidaries.
Yeah, exactly.
And all Navajos are only good for silver work.
Yeah,
that's baloney.
Yeah,
but it's out there in print.
Yeah, okay.
Because that's the whole thing that drew me in. I never expected to be collecting. I didn't expect to be a collector at all. I was an art librarian, a curator, and then a college professor. And this is the kind of work I would help people who were collectors. But I never expected to become a collector. And I did.
Right. So when you were a little kid, let's just go there since I got you. When you were a little kid, were you a collector?
No.
Not at all.
No, but I have an interesting association with Indians of a sort of like weird type. I grew up in upstate New York in what was known as leatherstocking country. It's central New York, and it's bounded on the north by the Erie Canal and on the south by the foothills of the Catskills. Mm-hmm. My mother's family came over with old Judge William Cooper and became his tenants, and he granted them land about 8 miles northwest of Cooperstown. And of course, old Judge William Cooper had a famous son named James Fenimore. Mm-hmm. So I was reading the Leatherstocking Tales and The Last of the Mohicans as a kid. But what was amazing to me growing up is that I'm all surrounded by Indian place names and cultural references, and there are no Indians there.
Right. And
why? Because the Mohawks were all kicked up to Canada because they fought on the wrong side during the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
So that was the beginning of the interest.
And so right as a kid, you recognized that, these are native, sounding names. What is this? And it piqued your interest. And were you always interested in books because you worked
constantly.
Yeah, right.
When we temporarily moved to Albuquerque for 2 years because my dad was a grad student at UNM, I was on the floor of our large Plymouth. I guess this was 1962, and we actually had a lady back-ended us, and I was on the floor. I didn't even feel it, because that's what those cars were like back then. But it's going to sound like boasting, and I'm not. It's just the plain truth. I was reading John Chardy's translation of Dante's Inferno in paperback. And I'm in 4th grade.
Yeah, okay. So you were
I was an only child, lived rural, didn't have a lot of people to play with.
Right.
So it's books, and it still is this day.
Yes.
And my husband says, I knew when I married her that she would always have her nose in a book.
Uh-huh. And so do you read every day still?
Oh, every day.
Yeah.
I'll sometimes read 2 or 3 books at the same time.
Yes. Can you read on Kindle, or do you like to have a book?
No, I like
in your
books.
Hand?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can read on Kindle, but right now there's nothing I particularly want.
Yeah.
I think if I get older and we have to worry more about money, I may become a Kindle freak.
Or you can make the type bigger too as your eyes start to have more issues.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so when you're growing up, when you get to high school, were you going, I want to be a librarian, or what did you think?
That was the last thing I ever planned to do.
Okay, what did you think you wanted to be?
My career path was interesting because that was not what I wanted to do. I wrote all the time as well as read books, and I was on the high school and then the college newspaper. I went to Binghamton University. I wanted to be a journalist or a writer.
And you are.
And indeed, I did. And, where everybody was whining in college about having to write papers, which you do.
Right.
I loved writing them, so they all
it
thought I was weird, she's writing paper, And I became an anthropology major. Back in the day, this is the early mid-70s.
Right.
It was called Anthropology of the North American Indian. There was no Native American studies at that time, which was unfortunate for me. I kind of didn't enjoy it. I have a lot of grievances with anthropology. I don't, just as I said about value judgments, things like that. I was shocked that Frank Hamilton Cushing would do what he did. And today they still hate him in Zuni.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. And just amazed. And I finally converted over to art history. And it was very much, the professors were all Western European focused. They had to beg, the grad students had, I stayed for the BA in art history and anthropology. Then I stayed there for a master's in art history. And I couldn't really do like Native American because there just wasn't that construct in the 70s. So
This is the early 70s, right?
Yeah.
And you're back east in New York area?
Yeah, I'm at Binghamton University. Yes. I get that degree in 75. I stand for the MA in art history, get that in 77. And then I had to make a big choice. I wanted to teach undergraduate art history, especially American art history. And I hadn't really thought, because it was the 70s and people in my family just didn't think, they were rural and didn't think about that. What would be involved in having a career teaching college? Now, there's a transition going on in the 70s. Up until then, you could go get a job at a college with an MA, teaching survey, lower level in undergraduate courses. But it was beginning to switch in the 70s in art history. You needed that PhD. And I didn't want to do it. And I started thinking, I don't come from money and, this and that. And I said, why don't I become an art librarian? And I'm very ambitious. Maybe I can become the art librarian.
Right, sure.
And I did it, by the way.
Yeah, well, I'm going to hear about that.
So, and so I waltzed down to Columbia into their library school and said, okay, this is a deal. I only want to be an art librarian. I know I'll have to take other courses that are not art focused, but when I do projects and things, I want them to be related to art. And they're like, okay, fine. So I did. So that took 2 years. So I graduated in 79.
And that was with an advanced degree
and an MLS, or actually an MS from Columbia. So I had 2 master's degrees, an MA and an MS. And I was now a professional librarian.
And this is like 78 that you graduated or so?
I graduated in 79. And then my boyfriend, soon-to-be husband, had an existential moment, didn't want to stay around New York. He's in publishing. And he applied to grad schools, and one was University of Wisconsin-Madison, one was UCLA. They both offered him fellowships. we often wonder what would happen to us if we'd gone all the way. But he went to Wisconsin. I went with him. I had such a bad time there. And that's a whole podcast in itself. So let's just say it had to do with the times. And I left, and I had been offered a job at this college in Westchester County, Purchase College, which is a conservatory kind of fine arts and music and other college. And they had gotten a person to replace me, and that person didn't like the job and left. So I took it. I got a second chance. So I was there for a couple of years, and then I got wooed to go to the Museum of Modern Art in New York. So down there I go, and I'm head of reference. And that's pretty cool. I had so much fun. This is before MoMA went corporate, before a lot of the art museums really went corporate. The changeover was in the 80s, as I was at MoMA from 83 to 87.
Could you take off on your lunch breaks and go look at some, was there a favorite or favorites in that museum that you go, oh God, I'm just going to go sit here for a while?
Well, I looked at Guernica like good before they went and took her back to Spain, you know. The Picasso Guernica, the big one there.
1938.
Yeah. And then I also loved Picasso's Demoiselles d'Avignon. I can't pronounce French for nothing, but I love that painting too. And then later on when I was teaching it, because I did get to teach. I mean, I'm a woman who had a lot of second chances in life, including life itself, because I'm a brain tumor survivor. And I came in. And that's sort of why I ended up in Arizona too. But anyway, so I was fine, but I was very ambitious, and I was just head of reference. But the problem was I was beginning to get bored with being a librarian.
And this is that MoMA you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Museum of Modern Art for those.
Yeah, Museum of Modern Art. I applied for Curator of Art and Architecture at the New York Public Library. Applied for it, didn't hear anything. Remember calling the HR woman one time and she blew me off. It was months and months. I actually forgot about the job. It was like 6, 7, 8 months. Then all the day, the same lady called me, oh, Paula, would you come down for an interview? And I did, and they wanted to hire me, and I got it. And I landed on making what I did because MoMA's art department of art books is, along with the National Gallery of Art, and obviously Library of Congress, and the Metropolitan, one of the biggest and most uniquely rare book loaded collections in the country.
Yeah, in the world, probably.
There was just one problem. It was a horrible place to work for. Horrible. And the less I say about that, the better. It actually was a scandal because in 2007-8, they got new trustees in, and they decided to get rid of all their over 50 employees who'd been there for quite a while.
And where was this?
This is the New York Public Library, the one at 42nd and 5th Avenue. Okay. And the real reason was we were all in the New York State pension plan, and they wanted to get rid of the tier 1s. And I was a tier 4, so I thought, oh, I'm safe, but eventually they got rid of me, but they did it beautifully. They gave me retiree health benefits for life.
Oh, that's good.
And
that's a big deal,
including
actually.
a health reimbursement fund.
Wow.
And I went. And as soon as I got out of there, I was like detoxing. I realized that I had, for 22 years, I had been living and operating in a very toxic environment. But to get back to that, while I was being an ambitious librarian, in 1986, we went to Santa Fe for our mid-year executive board meeting. And I was on the executive board meeting. I was already really getting sick of being a librarian. And we were in Santa Fe. And I would go up to the Plaza when there were smoking breaks or whatever. We were at the Hotel St. Francis in a little conference room doing bylaws and amendments and, really not my thing. And so I would run up with the smokers to the Plaza. And there I saw this jewelry. And it was boom. Just like I fell in love with somebody by sight. And then I was a collector. So then
Do you remember what you saw? Was it under the Plaza, under the Portal, or was it in a
It was actually in Ortega's. I hate to admit it.
No, I mean, they have good joy.
But we're talking. This is 86.
Yeah, they have good joy.
I was looking at Ortega's, and they also had luscious handbags, which I'm very fond of. Yes. Another dressy kind of,
Right.
Because Southwestern stuff was still big then. You and I know that all that kind of Southwestern look is kind of gone.
Different.
But
in 86,
it was very much,
right.
People went to Indian Market and they dressed up in the...
Still do, by the way.
I don't see it that much anymore, Mark. But I sure saw it in the 80s and 90s.
I always go and look for Mr. and Mrs. Santa Fe when I go to the market. And there's always somebody that just
goes, sure
wow.
So I hear I am a collector, but...
And did you buy something at that trip?
I bought a couple of rings, which was appreciated because I began to see what the really good stuff cost.
Yes.
And even in the 80s, I wanted to buy a Michael Caboti. I was going to shell out.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have a huge income as a librarian.
I'm sure not.
And my husband was in publishing, so neither of us had picked, we weren't stockbrokers or anything like that. So I remember going to, I think it was Al Anthony first, and then Lavina Ohl in Scottsdale, and saying, I want to be a great collector, but I don't have a lot of money. And I remember Lavina going, rings. Said, you buy the best rings going, and you look out for young rising talent. And she was. I found Daniel Sunshine Reeves.
Yeah.
All kinds of people. I mean, Philander when he was still half a kid.
Right.
And now Philander's going high end, and I have all this Philander stuff. And I'm like, good thing I bought it back then because he can't afford it now.
And when you were in the library, just curious, so you were the curator of art and architecture?
Of the book collection.
Yes. Okay. I just wanted to. And so what does a curator do?
I guess I should explain. My title was curator, largely because we were the Miriam and Ira D. Wallach collection of art, prints, and photographs. And my sister departments were prints and photographs with the real stuff. And I was the art book collection, including the rare book collection.
I see.
And I got in, working in the New York Public, it was so weird. I didn't have to do much curatorial, but I wanted to because I got in there in 87. I was really, really tired of being a librarian.
Yeah.
And I wanted to kind of be an academic again, but, wasn't getting the PhD.
Right.
So I wrote my own ticket and I ended up curating 6 exhibitions. They were all related to design history because it was a new methodology coming up in the 90s, and that's when most of my shows were. And the first one is Victorian ornament. I did one called A Change of Clothes, talking about women's garments and undergarments and this and that. And then my really popular one where I got on NPR and this and that and the other was I got all kinds of acclaim for it, was called A Rakish History of Menswear. And I had the George Catlin, one of the original prints of him, of the poor guy that goes to Washington, and he's going to Washington in his buckskin and feathers, and he comes back in a cavalry article holding a fan and all that, and to make a big point about, because I was already knowing that I wanted to work in Native culture.
Right. And you had a background in anthropology, too.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
And enough to know that I didn't want to follow. And I actually had some run-ins with a couple of anthropologists that my fellow librarians, here, you'll meet so-and-so, including someone here in Tucson who will remain forever. Just like, you want to do what? It's like, you don't have a PhD and you want to do all this stuff.
Right, I know.
It's like, screw you. Anyway, so I made my own way. So I'm collecting and I'm looking and I'm buying and I'm getting to meet artists.
And this is from 86 on.
Yeah. So this is my life from 86
And in 86, you're still in New York, right?
Right.
Okay.
I'm in New York right up until 6 years ago.
Okay.
But I did get laid off from there after 22 years. I did get a very nice New York State pension. They had kind of filled it so that I was 55 when I retired. So I was immediately eligible for New York State pension. technically, if I'd stayed there, I would have been 62. But when I went to the New York State Pension Office, the guy said to me, he said, you're doing pretty good by going now at 55. You get more money. He was not wrong.
Right.
So what the heck do I do with myself now?
Yeah.
Because, in New York, you're 55, you're over the hill.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to hire you. So it was a fluke thing. I'd gone back to Purchase. I was bored. I taught a little non-credit course on history of interior design. And in the next to last class, one of my adult students raised her hand and said, well, my husband is an assistant dean at Berkeley College, which was a business college in New York, New Jersey. It used to be secretarial school. Then it became a rather well-liked business college. And she said, they're looking for someone to teach art history. I said, okay. I had my resume in there, and then he passed it on. The guy hired me immediately. He said, you are just what we need.
Nice.
And this was 2010. So I'm an adjunct professor of art history at a business college. And here's the even best part. The Berkeley liked to specialize in students of color, especially Black, but also Hispanic. And then they brought in Asian and Korean. I had all of them, and students would come in on work, for these kind of fellowships. It was interesting. The Korean students were not as sharp as the Chinese, but I didn't see enough to be legitimate about this. It's just kind of how it fell out. But Berkeley believed in having quarters, not semesters. So I'm teaching 4 classes a year, 12-week classes. I'm teaching my face off. I'm teaching American art history, the art of creativity, which is great minds. I'm teaching contemporary art history. I'm teaching media studies, you name it. I love it. I got my wish. After all this strange career as a librarian, where I finally was got to be kind of academic in my job as librarian, and then
and this was 2010?
Yeah. And I stayed there up into 2017 when my husband realized that he could transfer and work remotely. And he worked for Pearson Education, the large publisher. And he was allowed, we could move to Arizona. And my father had just passed away, so I had no living relatives. And I'd been looking after him in upstate. So I was free to go. But Berkeley did not have a tax agreement with Arizona. So I had to leave Berkeley. I moved here in October. I graded my papers online in December, and I was done.
Now you start collecting in 86 jewelry, and now we're all the way to 2010. During that period of time, were you still collecting jewelry and learning and reading
Never
about
stopped. I have
jewelry?
A lot of pieces.
And did you start thinking in that time frame, okay, I should maybe do some book writing?
Thank you for bringing that up, because I was working on it. And around 90, 92, I wrote an article for the Journal of Design History, British, and it was vetted. And I sent it in. I thought, I don't know whether they're going to go for this. And they accepted it. And I thought, okay. I had, like most collectors, run out to buy every book I could find.
Right.
And
yeah, there wasn't a lot.
I mean, Adair was the Bible, but that was Adair. Yeah. I even bought the Elkis catalog because that had his last big essay in it. And he went out on a limb I would never dare go. He was starting to call periods of, the age of modernism, the age of transition. I spend more time with Native people now than I do with collectors. And I'm more tuned into them now than collectors, although collectors are still, the reason ostensibly that I wanted to write. But I look around at what I saw was a lack. And remember, this is before Jonathan Bacon did his great book, before Henrietta did. I thought Surviving Desires is one of the best books out there. It's also super scholarly because she is a scholar.
Right.
And a Brit. And so I thought, well, I could write scholarly accessible. And I'm doing them for collectors because my publisher, Schiffer, that was their deal.
Right.
But after I'd done a couple books with Schiffer, it was like, honey, you can do what you want. And I did.
Your first book was in 2000?
The first book was 1999. It was the Encyclopedia of Native American Jewelry.
Yes.
And it's still the only one out there. And I did that precisely because I was a librarian. And I felt that I was paying my dues by doing that. Because that was something that would go on library bookshelves in colleges and public libraries and out here in the Southwest. But after that, I started writing. And I was introduced to the Schiffers by Lynn Truesdell, pretty well-known collector, dealer from New Hope, Pennsylvania. Yep. And we had made close friends.
Yeah, she loved all the vintage.
Oh, God. Stuff. Lynn was like going for an audition. I had been led to Lynn by other people I was dealing with, like Mike and Allison Bird Romero and other people like that. And the story on Lynn was you went in, and it's like you interviewed with her, and she had this little shop, and she had stuff there, and if she liked you, she would go back and open a door, and you would step into a museum.
Yeah.
Longboats, 18th century buckskin outfits.
Yeah.
You name it.
Yeah.
She
good
had
stuff.
it.
Yeah. And is that where you started to learn? I mean, because to try to understand early jewelry, especially Navajo, Zuni, Hopi, you have to have, especially in that time frame, there still wasn't a lot out there from internet, YouTube, really.
But that's
none of
why
that.
I wrote the encyclopedia.
Yeah. But you have to learn the information.
Yeah, I had to learn it and then think of how to present it.
Right.
And I'm sure there's some flubs in there.
Well, there's flubs in everything.
Yeah.
Trust me, I read books too.
But, that was my way. And to this day, I keep up with Haudenosaunee. I keep up with Northwest Coast. But frankly, the market is here in the Southwest. And that's where I would come.
But did Lynn help you go, let me show you some things that'll help you identify?
Everybody did that.
Yeah.
Everybody I dealt with. My best piece of luck was to get Bob Bover as my mentor.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I have the classic story that you'll hear from everybody about the one that, you broke your heart over. This was around 88, so I still didn't know for nothing. I was in Old Town Albuquerque. There was a couple that were selling old weavings and jewelry and stuff that were working out of a rented place. I should have seen that red flag right there. And they sold me for $2,000. And $2,000, a lot of money for me at that time with my income and my husband's income. Sure. They sold me a little, one of those classic Pueblo
cross necklaces,
yeah, with the heart of the dragonfly, like that,
exactly.
And it was on trade beads in buckskin. Oh, they said 1900 to 1910.
Right.
So I bring it up to Bob, and he says it's 10 years old. It's made from sheet silver. It's like, no. So I began learning hard because I didn't want to be taken.
Yeah.
And that's the problem, unfortunately. In this field, people do buy things that are much more money than that. And then it turns out they get cheated because it's one of the most evil black markets going. And there are black markets in every art and antique area.
Yeah.
But in native jewelry, it is cruel how bad it is. And of course, it doesn't help them.
Yeah.
It hurts them. It hurts the people that really don't need that kind of economic blow.
Yeah, and the worst ones are when they're contemporary living silversmiths and people are knocking off their stuff. That's not it. I see it everywhere in every field. Anything that I deal in, there are people pretty much that try to knock it off. And even in contemporary art, even in painters, you'll see people go, "Oh, I'll do something like that." They may put their name on it, but they're just.
Did you ever have anybody trying to sell you a fake Maynard Dixon?
Oh. Hundreds of times.
You did.
Hundreds.
I want you to know that when I taught in college there for the 8 years and I taught American art history, I always put up Earth Knower.
Yeah.
And, it's a standard. But, I'm saying to the kids, and remember, these are like black kids, who are, their earphones and they're just not knowing this culture thing. And I'm saying to them, I say, okay, what do you see? Why is this Indian in a blanket stand up there by himself? and they get it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're intuitive. They're like, oh yeah, it matches the hills.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, if I went back and taught it at Purchase, all the white kids would probably not quite get it at all. They were good about catching things.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of these students who had no background, nothing, just could pick up on a lot of the art history. The other nice thing is they asked me particularly, I got to make a lot of my curriculum. I just had certain course standards I had to follow and testing and all that. But when I taught American art history, they asked me to teach Native American, Hispanic, and Latin American, North American artists. So I could teach Frida Kahlo and Diego Rivera. Well, I, having been a student in the 70s, it was all white bread. I learned a lot about Black artists and more about Hispanic artists and stuff like that. It was great. And you put them together and you could see it because a lot of Chicano art was coming out and murals and things, and they got it in one. So that was fun. And it was fun working with kids who did not come from, you know, like a privileged background, if you call it. Parents go to the Hamptons, stuff like that. These, you know, it was also tough teaching these kids because a lot of them, Berkeley made a big deal about how they were the ones that were going to teach kids that were the first ones in their families to go to college and get a degree. Well, that came with a lot of burdens because families weren't always very helpful. I had one student who was a great student, and every time a midterm would come up or a test, I still don't know if he was bullying me or not, but he'd say, my mother got an asthma attack and I had to take her to the hospital. And I had another student where I think it was the real truth, or that and the other. Otherwise, there would be creative things. But I mean, there were dozens of times that I saw these kids being pulled back or whatever by family not understanding that, yes, they had to get a paper done by that or
yeah, different culture, different world.
Yeah.
So when you're learning, just to get back to the jewelry, so you were learning from different people like Bob,
right?
And at some point you go, okay, I can write something. I have enough knowledge now. I don't know when that happened.
I know who to go to.
And so important. Yeah, that I know who to go to if I don't, or they'll help going, yes, this is vetted. You say, okay, I can do this and should do this. And what point was that? Do you know?
Well, the books came out. The first book was 1999. The first Schiffer book was 2000.
You did one on bracelets, right? On cuffs.
Well, yeah, the chronology was
and
the
rings.
Encyclopedia, Southwest Silver Jewelry, which should have had Indian or Native American in it. But Pete Schiffer Sr., there had been goofs there, and he just put it so. But everybody knew it. That's the book that everybody got to know me by. That was my breakthrough book. Then I did one on rings, bracelets, Pueblo bead jewelry.
Right.
And now I'm in this double Navajo Pueblo
right.
jewelry.
And the historic one that we just talked about.
So I'm saying that, and I started writing magazine articles in the mid-'80s.
Yes.
And remember, I'm doing this also because I don't like my job.
Right.
I don't like it. I also have New York City employees. New York City employees you can do nothing with.
Yeah.
You cannot discipline them. You cannot transfer them. And when I came on the job, one or two that were real bad had been transferred into my department because there had been no department head for a couple of years there. You know that trouble always happens when that is the case.
Right.
So I had two that were transferred into there. So, you know, in order to compensate for having a hellish day at work, I had this work I was doing. And then I was doing the exhibitions and I was good at it. So they kept asking me to do more. So it was kind of how I dealt with there. So it allowed me to be kind of an academic even when I wasn't one. I was a working art librarian, but I was an academic.
Yeah, you were an academic. And I think you're getting back to what you always wanted to be when you were a kid. That's why, we're talking about you wanted to be a writer, right? You wanted to do research. You wanted to write. You liked anthropology enough to look at it as a degree. You liked Native American art. It was all falling together for you, but you still had to live and eat and all that other stuff. So I bet you were your happiest when you got home and could write and do research and think. And you probably worked more hours than you did in the library because you didn't care because it was fun. And so you start writing these books.
You know what I used to do?
Yeah.
I used to run away from my staff and go to the other departments in New York Public Library, like the map division and local history, and I'd hide away in a corner. And I kind of got known as the peripatetic curator. But eventually there would be a call or something. Is Paula down there?
Right.
You got to get up. So
Right.
It was kind of funny. It was good for me though, because I got to know the other curators and chiefs,
yes,
and all of that, and I got to know the Indian section. And I mean, it's real. It's anthropology. It's
yes.
yeah. Do you know we had such rare books in the New York Public Library? Did you know that during the Indian Wars, the Department of War, which then became the Department of the Interior, which I always find funny, the Department of War had mugshot books of chiefs and warriors, and I had access to them. I kept trying to nag for doing a native show, and there's too much danger. It's too controversial, so I never got any luck.
Oh, yeah, that would
But
be
we just
interesting.
had great stuff.
And they were actual. And did they get the photos of the?
They were daguerreotypes.
Yeah.
They were shots.
Yeah.
They were mug shots in there, and they were distributed to probably the forts out there and. When an army, general, we're looking. Well, hey, we're looking for not just Coach Chiefs, but these 6 other guys that were in his band.
Yeah,
Isn't that funny?
That's
I loved it. I just love that.
And so, come around. When you start making these books, when you at some point did you go, okay, there's certain ones I do want to write, and I have a vision of how it should be. Clearly, that must have happened in these last 2 volumes because you're the one that's. Which was it's an excellent book, by the way. I like the book.
Thank you.
And one of the things I like about it personally is I like the timeline in it. I think that's a very helpful thing for people to be able to look at and see what's going on.
I think so. And I try to get, and I will stop at 1980 in this book.
Yeah.
I'm doing.
Why that date?
Why that date? Because I've chosen that. This is where I've gone out on a limb. This is where I'm being John Adair in later life.
Right.
I say that by 1980, Native American jewelry was accepted as a fine art. That it was beginning to be. Adair said it was in the 70s that happened. And I decided to draw the line at 1980. Now, they had been saying that it was fine art all the way back to the MoMA show, which is where I began to hook onto this. Renee Darnancourt and Frederick Douglass, who were big deal white art historians, had done Indian arts of the United States and all that. And they came out and said Navajo and Pueblo jewelry is fine art. And if you remember, in Western society, decorative arts are always kind of second to the fine arts, painting, drawing, sculpture, photography. And now we can call native jewelry making a fine art.
Was that the 1931 show?
41 show.
41.
Yeah. Okay. And they only did it because it was wartime and they couldn't do the exchanges to build an exhibition from Europe and all that.
So will you go 1980 or 1989 or?
No, I go 1980, and my justification is that in 1981, Ralph Lauren did his Southwestern collection of clothing. And as every model went up and down the runway, they were wearing concha belts, large squash necklaces. And then I had started talking to artists like Mike Bird Romero and some of the others. Oh, yeah, we were making jewelry for Teal McKibben in the late 70s, and she said it was for an important thing. And that really was, I'm going out on a thing and saying this was the popular culture acceptance line where Native American art is fine art from 80 on. It was undoubtedly fine art even as far back as 41. People that knew well were calling it, but the general public was not ready to accept it. And because what I'm doing is with the 46 to 79, I'm talking this is the age of craft. Indian arts and crafts, craft work.
Right.
And I'm making a case for that, even though it was actually fine art, but it wasn't recognized as that. Pottery might be, weavings might be, but the jewelry was still in that Indian arts and crafts,
Well, Sacred
bucket.
Circle also was 81, and that had Loloma in it. And that was, Helen Hardin, Loloma, Tony Day, R.C. Gorman, and Alan Hauser. I think that's all. And Fritz Schulter. So they had at that point, those are all basically painters and sculptors. They also threw in Loloma, and that's 81. So that also makes sense.
I think Loloma, Kenneth Begay, and Preston, and his son were the big four.
Yes.
But there were others. I mean, Ted Charvis was working in the 70s, and he died in 1980, which was just unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
But he
Mark
was
Chi
making...
died in 77, right?
Right. But, so dates are, but again, art history, anthropology, they love these date lines. Mm-hmm. But we know that when we're dealing with something that's commercial, saleable, and that there is a whole collector base, that you will get some of this, back and forth. When did this exactly
Well, I can open the next book, 1980 to 2000.
Are you kidding? I'm writing more. Rio Puerco Dairy Queen story. Tied up in Tucumcari. I could just see lots of different titles for these short stories.
I grew up right next to Tucumcari.
Did you really?
Did,
well, there you go.
When you need that reference, call me. I'll tell you.
But I was lucky. I had those 2 years in New Mexico as a kid, and I was here. I was in 4th grade when one day we're all doing a thing. Students came over the Tannoy or PA back then. Students, your parents are coming to get you. We're closing the school. President Kennedy has been shot. Because we all remember that, right?
Yeah.
And I remember because I was in 4th grade. I was 8, or something.
Oh yeah, you'll remember it at 8. Trust me.
And I started school at a pretty young age. I was kind of upset too. All the grown-ups. We were in grad student housing, so like my mother and my friend's mother was across the way. They're all crying and sitting in the living room watching TV or radio. And I kind of remember kicking a can around outside, and I was scared a little. I was like, "Oh, Dallas is really close to Albuquerque."
Yeah.
I didn't know any better. I was a girl from upstate New York.
Right. Yeah. It's the West. The West is the West.
We got lucky. My parents had no money. We certainly had no money as a grad student back then in the 60s. But I had 2. I was taken once to Santa Fe, which I thought was fantastic. It was like a European city to me. Mm-hmm. We ate up on what's the Orr House or one of those on there. I was like, wow. Mm-hmm. We went to Acoma for the corn dance. I was wowed by that. And I'm not Acoma, Santo Domingo. Yeah. But we went to Acoma, and my father's professor had a tie to Acoma. So we were allowed to go up the back way, the way that everybody went for 1,000 years or more. Right. And we had a pregnant woman, one of the grad student wives, and you look down and you're jumping over and these ravines. Yeah. But I remember hand to toe crawling up, and we all did it.
Yeah, I know.
And, and then I was just fascinated. So the Acoma, the Santo Domingo dancing, of course, I would love something like that.
Right.
Didn't know anything, at that point. And, it always stayed with me. And my mother wasn't really too into jewelry, but we'd always go into Old Town, and she bought a couple of Zuni needlepoint bracelets. So I grew up with her wearing that.
Yeah, so, there was a bond there, clearly.
Yeah.
Something clicked in 86 immediately.
I loved it. They wanted my dad to stay on for a PhD and stay in the area, and he wanted to also. He was a Spanish teacher. He was a teacher of teachers of Spanish, and he wanted to stay, but my mother cried and wanted to go back to upstate. So there we go.
You came back anyway. So what do you think? What's your takeaway? What do you want people to remember about your books?
That they are learning tools, that they were put together with love, that I spent a lot of time with Native people and dealers and Indian traders and collectors, and that all these diverse markets came together to give me enough knowledge to try to put a book together, because a lot of people are very naive about things that they don't understand. The other thing that's really breaking through to me is that Native people now, they haven't forgotten. They hate a pretendian.
Yeah.
They have all kinds of lingo and talk amongst themselves that I can pick up on if I'm hanging around with them. And they do talk about colonial and being colonialized and, and this and that and the other. They know what would happen to them. And I'm with them on that. I really am. I think that this nation really needs to pay more attention to Native people. And it has been hard. I mean, we just got Deb Haaland into Department of Interior now.
Right.
And this then.
And I love it because she wears Native jewelry all the time.
I know.
She's from Laguna.
Yeah. And I there's just so much we can learn from them. And the most fun I've ever had. I made very deep personal connections over the years. My very close friend was Orville Ticini. I'm wearing his bracelets. I bought a lot of stuff over the years with Orville. Orville had a, quadruple bypass. He had a heart attack.
Yeah, quadruple bypass.
And they had to airlift him from Shiprock, where he lived, down to Albuquerque. Well, he didn't get it for free. And I remember getting a call about 6 months later saying, I hate to do this, but I'm going to all my collectors and asking if you can help me with money because I have this huge bill for the air. And I was just furious that he had to pay such a big bill. And we gave money, but it wasn't money at the time we really had to play with. But I thought, okay, I don't buy stuff now for a while. He's more important.
Yeah.
And he passed a few years ago, as you probably know. And I'm still pretty fond and tight with his family. But he didn't really want any helpers or, like, he had trained Allison Lee and a few other people in how to do things. A lot of Navajo men and women would do that with each other. They would train him how to do.
Yeah, they still do.
Yeah, like Rick Charlie showed Daryl Dean and Rebecca how to do the reticulation, stuff like that. And and I always said to him, you really should, your son-in-law or your other daughter who's really good at polishing, oh no, I want to be my own man. And, now so be it.
Well, that's why we give back, hopefully.
Yeah.
As dealers, I think it's incumbent upon us to do some type of education and giving it back, your knowledge, so it just doesn't die with you. And sometimes dealers are hesitant to do this because they feel like it's priority, information, and they don't, they think of the money aspect and they don't think of we need to let people know,
Yeah, they do.
Bob's really good about giving it out, right?
Bob is really good. But right? Bob said that his awakening was he went to UNM as an undergraduate, and one of his fellow students who was Navajo invited him to come live with her Navajo family for a summer. And yes, they lived in a Hogan. Can't remember where they were. Somewhere like, it's not Pine Springs, that area, but not far from there. And, he spent a summer with them and with other silversmiths, and he's a working silversmith himself. I had also taken silversmithing in high school and made a brooch, which I wouldn't show to anybody in the world. Actually, it wasn't half bad, but still, I was 17. Right. Well, I wasn't even 17. I was like 14 or 15 when I made it. It wasn't badly made, but, well, anyway, it needed better finishing. And I always felt like, all these things come together at some point.
Right.
So, for me as a child growing up and interested, mine was sort of like the negative thing. This is the Mohawk Valley, but where are the Mohawks? What? In Canada? How come? Oh, they were on the wrong side of the Revolutionary War. Right. But how come there's Senecas and Oneidas over in that part of the state? Oh, well, they had better politics or something like that. Because the whole Haudenosaunee nation broke up with those wars. I mean, first there was the French and Indian. Right. And then, of course, the Revolutionary War. And they sided with the British. And boom. It was my family. It was helping to send them up there. I wasn't going to say it, but to make a connection to maybe of guilt or something, my mom's family came over on the Mayflower. And I always thought it was kind of a joke because we didn't have a lot of money or anything. Right. And then, here I am in college, And I got a letter from the DAR
Right.
saying, Paula Baxter, you are eligible to enroll as a DAR member. Once
Right.
the sound ripped it up, I went back to my joint, you know.
Right.
I mean, it was just not
Right.
to be. But hell, I'm sure my family never helped anybody who was native or anything, you know.
Yeah,
you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know, right?
You don't know, but you know, maybe knowing that. Yeah, I mean, I grew up pretty white bread. I didn't ever meet anybody of any color until I went to college.
Mm.
It was white bread all the way.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a hard and different. I grew up in just the opposite because I grew up in New Mexico. So
yeah,
I was always around,
also,
Hispanic people and some native culture.
Also a lot of poverty, though, in upstate New York.
I'm sure.
So
yep.
When you go to the reservations, I'm not shocked by it.
No.
It's very, the only thing that would be different is there might be a snowmobile in front of a home of a family on welfare or something like that, which right. Snowmobile and they're on welfare. How dare they? That kind of thing.
So when will the next book come out?
25. It'll probably come out in 26.
And is that a Schiffer book as well?
Yeah.
Okay. And the current book is still in press?
Oh, it will be for quite a while.
Yeah. And where can people find that?
Amazon, and you can buy it from Schiffer.
Yes. And you have a website as well, where it's a South.
I have to work on it. SouthwesternSouvenirs.com. Yeah, because I went to it. Yeah. I have a pre-appraisal on there that I'm taking off.
Yeah.
I plan to do something with that website when I finish this book. And now that I have so many Native friends, I may do discussions or get short stories from people or stuff like that. And I'm going to do something with it. I think that I am going to do a book of short stories that is going to be called Southwestern Souvenirs, so that explains. And we were very lucky, and we bought up SW Souvenirs, Southwestern Souvenirs, Southwest Souvenirs. Right. We bought all the, what do you call them? The
URLs, domain names.
Yeah, the URLs, the domain names. That's it. And because I've been so busy this last 20 years or more, I haven't done anything with that website, but I need to.
Don't wait. Time goes quick, and you go, "Oh, I haven't done it yet." And it's like anything, I guess.
Well, I just
put it at the same priority as you do your books, I guess.
Well, as soon as that book is done, I will be able to do something, and I think that I might do something. I mean, I'm meeting a lot of really cool people like J.J. Otero, and do you know anything about him? JJ had worked in IT and had quite a career in IT, and then he went through various things, and he just started working full-time as a jeweler. And he's on Facebook, and it's like little stories. His work is fabulous, but he's only been working for like the last 5-8 years, and he's trying to catch up.
Is he native?
Yeah, he's native. He's Navajo.
JJ Otero?
Yeah, and I may actually put a talk with JJ, because he's very much about land back, resistance, and he puts some of that into his jewelry. And I like that. And because not a lot of jewelers spend time with that kind of, it's not the same as having Mateo Romero do some stuff on a beautiful vase or a pottery figure or something like that.
Diego for that. Mateo's the painter.
Mateo, all right.
The only reason I represent
okay,
Mateo.
I knew you would. I knew you'd get me, so I figured he'll fix me on that.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, you know what I'm talking about. Yes. I mean, it was a wonderful show. I knew, and he was a good friend of mine, David McFadden, who had been at the Millicent Rogers for a while and then came back east. And he's now at the Museum of Art and Design in Manhattan. And they had done a series of exhibitions, and I'm blanking only because you've got the microphone there.
Right.
But art of the reservation or something like that, or a pun on that.
Yeah.
And I saw some beautiful Diego Romero things that were absolute pow.
Oh no, they're tremendous.
Social commentary.
Yeah, no, they are.
And JJ has done a bit of that and gotten away. Monica King has a wonderful piece that I'm going to try to get a photo. It's into her. I'm going to get it from Diana. and may have her. She's been a great help as always.
How long does it take you to put a book like this together?
Years.
I would think. I mean, I know what it took me to do my Dixon book.
Yeah, for sure.
So
yeah, work like that, you bet. I've been running around 3-4 years. When I just limited myself to the rings and the bracelets, that was quicker. But Pueblo jewelry is like 4 years. And this one out now is 4 years. And this one's going to be 5 years because I moved and all that, and I just lost time and stuff like that. So,
do you have an Instagram account, by the way?
A what kind?
Instagram account?
No, I don't. Okay. Barry does, but I don't.
Yeah.
But there was something I was going to say. Do you also know that I don't make any money from these books?
No, didn't know that. So
yeah, some people say to me, "Oh, you must do really well." I would welcome, and I'd even put it up on my website. I don't even make enough money in my 2 checks. What's the word? I'm blanking on it.
Yeah, your residuals or your royalties.
Right. My royalties to buy a bracelet. I had one 3 times ago is $127.
Yeah.
Now I've been selling, this book has been selling well, so I got $865 that's big money for me.
Yeah, but you don't do this for money.
I don't do it. No,
right? I mean,
I'd be a darn fool if I did it for money.
I write my murder mysteries. I'm not getting.
There are a lot of people writing great murder mysteries that aren't getting much money or any more royalties than I am.
You don't do those for money.
Yeah, you don't do it for money. But some people are naive. They don't know. Yeah. They think I'm making big money.
Oh yeah. Well.
And a lot of them are like enthusiasts or new collectors. Oh, you must make a fortune with that book.
Yeah, no.
I did it because if I were now I can tell the world I was a failed academic who always kind of hated that I never did that PhD, but economically could not afford to do that PhD. Right. So
you're giving back.
I'm giving back, and this is my way of doing it.
Yeah, and it leaves a legacy in it. It's a trail. I doubt Adair made much money on his book either.
Yeah, I don't think he did.
No. He did it because he wanted people to see this is what's going on now.
Yeah.
And look, and and now we still use it as a reference guide. So they'll be using your books for reference guides for decades.
But my first book from 2000, Southwest Silver Jewelry, everybody still buys it. It's still in print. And the biggest compliment of all, I would go with Lynn to antique shows at Doylestown and New Hope and all that. Right. Anybody selling Indian jewelry would have a copy of my book open to show what it looked like.
There's your payment.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, there's your payment.
It's pretty good. Yeah.
Anything else that we haven't discussed that you want to?
No, that's enough and more than I expected to cover.
Yeah.
No, I love it, and I love Native people, and I wouldn't. I started out doing it for the collectors, and then now I do it for the Native people. Yeah. And so I'll end with this. One of the big artists, sent me a little quick note when the book came out. He said, "Thank you for what you do for us."
Nice.
That's the biggest and best reward I could ever get in my life.
I get it. 100%.
That's it.
That's gratitude for that. Paula Baxter. I love her books, and I read them, and I use them as a reference, and just the imagery too. Let's just maybe point out your husband does all.
He's a brilliant photographer,
and the photos are beautiful, and you can really look at the piece. And I think, especially if you're a visual person, I'm a very visual person.
Yeah.
There we go, visual.
Oh, a lot of people get those books to look at the photos and not my text.
But you can learn a lot by looking at an image. That's why I go to museums. Is because you can get things that you can't get just from the written word.
That was my art history training. For my MA, I had to memorize like 3,500 images out of Jansen's, not the history of art, but the other book, Monuments of key monuments in, American art history, not American, world art history, and know the flaws. And then I remember when my master's, exam. The Bury St. Edmund cross, they had taken the cross away from the figure.
Right.
And trying to fool me to say, and I had to say, well, that's a Bury thing. Yeah. I don't know where the cross is. Yes, you got it.
Right.
So but that's an old-fashioned way of training. People who study art history now do not learn because back in the early mid 70s, until about 75 was a turning point, it was believed that you could go teach in college, teach undergraduate, with a master's degree. So I had to know all this broad brush stuff, but now you don't. And so people don't know how to look.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I was trained in that old-fashioned
Yeah, it's
way.
really important to look.
It helps me a lot with fakes.
Of course.
When I go to Gallup, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
And, it depends on where I go in Gallup, but, I don't always get it exactly right, but that's a fake. That's a fake. That's the real thing. I better get it. Oh my God.
Well, you have to look and see. And that's where a book like yourself that has these great photographs, people can use them as reference and they can go back and go,
nothing beats looking at the
person.
art.
Yeah.
Going to shows and
no,
just
it's
looking
true.
and
And
looking.
touching and smelling and feeling, use all your senses, because you can find out. And just did a little reel on, why this belt isn't old. It was made to be old, but you can see the ridges. You can see there's no wear. Even the belt itself was faked. So you have to, it's important. So, and just take in as much as you can. Read, look, evaluate.
And
Yeah, and I'm still learning. Right, I've been doing it.
Of course,
I have said that jewelry is the hardest component to learn of all the native arts for me, because there's so much and it's so wide and broad.
You're correct.
And
You're correct.
I'm always amazed, like,
but you're dealing with a lot of different media here.
I am, and it's still find jewelry to be the hardest.
Challenge. Yeah.
Jewelry still is, and it's not that it's just there's so much to know.
Well, they're still saying it's a $1.5 billion industry, and they're calling it Indian arts and crafts. Some things will never go away. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And
no, that's true.
And not as much of it goes to the makers as you'd like.
Yeah. Well, that's why you got to buy from the makers too. So, and support them and wear native jewelry. Right.
Right.
Don't go, I can't wear it because I'm not native. No.
I'm shocked when I moved here to Scottsdale that nobody wears Indian jewelry that much. I wear it every day.
Yeah, no.
I have a collector friend in Albuquerque, a man, and he wears loads of it. And he said, I collect all the stuff. I love it. I live with it. I gotta wear it.
Yeah.
I don't care what other people think. I'm gonna wear it.
That's part of our
culture,
well,
that's
too.
The right attitude. I'll go with it.
So yeah, if you don't, when you support galleries and directly to artists, you're allowing them to do their, what they were chosen to do in life. And if you say, well, should I wear this? I'm not Navajo. Yes, you should, because I guarantee you the Navajo artists that make it want you to wear it because that's what they do. Embrace it, learn about it, learn about them.
But I was really lucky also with the non-native people that I met and who were also taught me a lot. Bob Gallegos.
Yeah.
To discern changes between native and Hispanic art.
Yeah.
Things like that. Bob Bover. John Hill.
Yeah.
And John Hill's the first person I think I bought a vintage piece of jewelry from. And then it went on from there.
Yeah. You buy
Lynn
from
Truesdale and
from all the people that know and spent their life doing it. And
Lavina O.
Those people are all
Laura Cardinal up at the gift shop she knows a lot.
Go to the experts, go to people who embrace it. So all right. I'll let you get back to photographing.
I gotta work.
I gotta
go to work.
Gotta go to work and make your 2 cents.
Yeah, right. To make my royalty check of $800.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Paula. I appreciate
Thank you, Mark, for this opportunity. I appreciate it.
All right, we'll go back and look at jewelry.
Yeah.
I'll take my Michael Cabote off so you can photograph it.
Very good.